And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Luanne from New York, go ahead.
Thank you. I was sitting on my deck a couple days ago thinking about how different my life is now compared to some years ago when I was struggling to cope with an abusive childhood. A friend who knew of my suffering led me to a practitioner from this church. I had no idea what a life-changing phone call that would be. Through her loving and patient guidance, she has taught me to embrace my true identity as a child of God and has taught me the necessity of forgiveness. The spiritual truths that she has spoken to me have come with tremendous healing power. I no longer live in a mind full of chatter and unpleasant memories. I no longer see myself as a victim, living in despair, depressed, and fearful. To be able to sit in peace, embracing the day, my heart filled with joy and love, is something I thought I would never experience. I cannot express enough how grateful I am to God for all I've been given. I'm so grateful for this science and for all the practitioner help I have received. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Candy from Wisconsin, go ahead.
Thank you. I need to say thank you for all Jesus, Mary Baker Eddy, this church, and my practitioner have done for me in recognizing the power of God. For a few months, I have been involved in a committee in which one member's ideas have seemed to be very, very out of place. For a few days after our meeting, I would let animal magnetism work me into a tizzy about what had transpired in the direction the committee was going. I realized this was wrong, and I had to get me out of the way. Mary Baker Eddy says in the Blue Book, one mind controls this and every hour. There is no power or rule of government or control apart from God. At work, I used to have a reminder pop up several times a day that said God is in control, and I needed to remember this now. As I work with this, a sense of peace about the situation developed. Although nothing has actually changed with the committee, I know God is taking care of the situation, and I cannot be used by animal magnetism. Thank you, and have a blessed night.
Thank you. Shahe Dot from Maryland, go ahead.
I am so grateful for Christian Science, for this wonderful independent church, and for the excellent practitioner help that I am so blessed with receiving here. Last Sunday, on that beautiful Easter morning, I took my dog for an early 3-mile walk up before the round table. We crossed several footbridges and walked along the levee trails near my home. As we were making our way back and a gentle breeze was blowing, my heart was filled with gratitude as I remembered when I feared to cross those bridges or walk those trails or even walk outside when the wind was blowing. I can't remember what it was that I was so afraid of. The fear was senseless, baseless, and completely irrational, yet I had allowed it to rule the roost. I found my freedom in Christian Science and thank God for the plain-field practitioners that helped me understand my inherent dominion as a child of God. I also want to express my gratitude for last Sunday's roundtable. It's impossible to listen to these roundtables and not want to fully embrace this most practical science. So very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. This past week, I was given Christian Science in Germany by Ms. Seal. And as soon as the guest that gave it to me left, I started reading it, and I just couldn't put it down. I completed the whole thing in the afternoon. It is a wonderful message that has taken place. Thank you.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
Good evening. When I first came to Plainfield, it was at someone's suggestion and the need of finding a practitioner. I found much more here, and I'm so grateful for the greater quality of life I'm experiencing through the better understanding of Christian Science. Recently, I've been experiencing dental issues. My practitioner stated the unreality of material teeth. My teeth are grounded in love. Teeth are spiritual ideas, and a spiritual idea has not a single element of error. Science and Health, page 463, line 12. Denying any belief of life and matter. I am so grateful for my practitioner's strong, loving support through her continual acknowledgement of truth. I'm grateful to God and for all this church offers. Thank you for tonight's reading, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I am grateful tonight for this past Sunday's roundtable. During the discussion, this quote was shared. Happiness is not having what you want, it is wanting what you have. I am so thankful that this church has shown me how true this is. When I first came here, I had just gone through a time where I lost my job, a marriage, and what felt like my place in the world. In the final days of that period, right before God brought me here, I just had this feeling that no one wanted my skills, my company, or anything to do with me. It was such an awful, empty feeling. And then I came to this church, and I found such happiness knowing that God had a use for me, and that He had been preparing me all along. To me, that feels like the ultimate happiness. God wants me, the real me that He created. What a surprise, and it's the best one I've ever had. I'm so grateful to learn the truth of God's creation here and my place within it. I'm rather amazed I failed to see God's ever-present goodness before I came here, because it's so evident to me now. This only makes me more grateful for Christian Science, for all this church offers, and for regular practitioner support, since it's clear I never would have figured it out on my own. Thank you. And now I have a testimony from Diana.
Hello, this is Diana from Berlin and Vienna. I'm in Vienna now, and I would like to express my gratitude for Saturday's Bible lesson on the 10 Commandments. I would particularly like to thank Jeremy and Luanne for their contributions on the discussion about the commandment to honor your father and mother. I would also like to thank Mary for sharing the article Your Background by Una Willard, which I'd like to quote now. Quote, "You came forth from the sound and stable foundation of truth. Sincerity, genuineness, and fidelity are the very nature of your being. You came forth from and are the substance of spirit. You are the loved of God. Your whole background is the background of love and love only. And there never has been and never can be a power that can change the status of love's child. You emerged from the background of radiance and beauty." Unquote. I love reading this and thinking about this because it does help me to more fully overcome dwelling on the inadequacies of my parents, and that also frees me more fully from the Adam dream. I remember when I was first singing in the Christian Science churches, I was for a long time puzzled by the term Adam dream, and I also found the line "break earth's stupid rest" and "feed my sheep" to be very strange. I would often go to New York City for auditions, lessons, or coachings, and once I started to truly study Christian Science, I would plan my time in New York City around opening hours of the Christian Science reading rooms in the city. I just loved going to them. And I vividly remember the moment on one of these times in New York that I finally figured out what the Adam dream was and what it meant to break Earth's stupid rest. I remember having read the definition of Adam in the glossary, which is, among other things, error, falsity, dust to dust, belief in original sin, sickness, and death, and I realized with rejoicing that I didn't have to be subjected to that Adam dream anymore, and that God was my Father, Mother God, and I could claim my divine inheritance, which is, among other things, health, life, and love. Sin, sickness, and death did not have to be part of my reality anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbara or Ken from Pennsylvania, go ahead.
Hi. Yesterday, when I was completely freaked out about this, that, and the other thing, I called a loving, faithful Plainfield practitioner. And it was so wonderful to me because I was so confused about what was wrong. And she just saw right through it and clearly what the error was trying to do. And through her prayers, I had a wonderful, peaceful night and a good, productive day today. And I'm very grateful for that. And also grateful for the Bible studies and roundtables. I think it was from this last roundtable. I have such a wonderful mind picture of Mary with a babe on her hip, ordering burglars out of her home. I just think that is so wonderful, and it has to have been divine authority because they did leave. I'd also say thank you for the wonderful readings today on God's loving care, and thanks everybody.
Thank you. Lil.
I recently had a wonderful proof of God's love. I was on a checkout line at a supermarket. I was the next one to check out, and I noticed the gal behind me had just one item. And she, being an employee there, looked a little like she needed to go as soon as possible. So I let her go ahead of me. When I noticed her putting a pot of tulips in place in the checkout line, she said, "These are for you. I'm a manager and I can give them to you." What a loving surprise. And I gave her a big hug and thank you. And it was really hard to keep back the tears. That was definitely God in action. It was just such a surprise, and I can't thank God enough. And thank you for the wonderful readings tonight and the music.
Thank you. Mike from New York, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the wonderful readings tonight, the testimonies, and the beautiful music. I'm grateful for what I'm learning here at Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. Saturday night, I experienced a very sore back. It made moving and even lying down difficult. From the Christian Science lessons given here, I knew I needed to oppose this lie about God's idea with a divine idea. In the Blue Book, Mary Baker Eddy describes 5 spiritual senses and spiritual feeling as a consciousness of God. The scientific statement of being, Mrs. Eddy states, quote, "There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter," unquote. I reasoned that I needed to feel God instead of a lie. The easiest thing that came to mind was to feel God's peace and joy, which I worked to do every time I awoke during the night. I also used what I try to pray nightly, which is Emmanuel, God with us, along with, quote, "Christian scientists, be a law to yourselves that mental malpractice cannot harm you, either when asleep or when awake," unquote. And that's from page 442 in Science and Health. In the morning, my back was close to being normal. Then during the round table, there were great points brought out on one of the forum posts on the necessity of doing things with joy as exhibited by Christ Jesus. It is always so helpful to me to see a variety of random items come together from seemingly different sources in a time of need. helps me see that there is indeed only one divine mind in which nothing is a coincidence. This also gave me proof that I shouldn't ignore all those little aches and pains, as one does when raised outside of Christian Science, which provides solutions to all of our needs. I'm so grateful to be learning in this church how to attain being at one with God and the continual reminders for accomplishing this. I'm grateful for the way this church honors Christ Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy, a prime example being the beautiful readings last Wednesday night on Mrs. Eddy. Thank you so much, and I'm so grateful to be here.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm so grateful to be learning in Christian Science in this church that God has a destiny or a plan for each one of us that is far better than we could ever imagine for ourselves or that anybody else could imagine for us. I remember when I first got to Plainfield and started attending this church, I was pretty wired. I was pretty anxious. I believe that I had to have some certain kind of a job or accomplish certain things or have certain things in order to be happy, to have a good life. And I also came with the notion that I thought it was important that people approve of me. And that turned out to be a real trap. So, and when I was driven that way, I was not content. I was not happy. I was not peaceful. And I made some of the worst mistakes that I've ever made, and had some of the worst problems that I've ever had. And even when I acquired some of the things that I thought I wanted or needed, they didn't really satisfy. And I'm grateful to say that it was a Christian Science practitioner in this church that helped me to see that the only way to know what's right is to listen for what God has for me. That God has a plan for me that's better, and it's the only good plan that I could ever want. And that plan involves doing for others and giving to others as He directs, and doing it with a smile on my face. And what I have found is that when I have done that, God has provided everything that I've ever needed. And I have felt more peaceful, more confident, more secure that God really is in control. I've never lacked anything when I have followed God's direction. I'm grateful to be learning to listen to what He has for me to do, and to have the courage to do what He has for me to do. I can honestly say the only times I've ever lacked are when I screwed up and didn't pay attention to what He was telling me. And now I can honestly say that the only approval I seek is God's approval. Well, occasionally I look for my wife's approval, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's God's approval only that matters to me. I am so grateful to be learning this, and I'm so grateful for Mary Baker Eddy for explaining to us so clearly that Christianity, true Christianity, is a science, that we can count on God to take care of us when we obey Him. And thank you, Amanda, for those fine readings tonight. So good to be here.
Thank you. Suzanne from Vermont, go ahead.
Good evening. My husband and I just returned from a 2-week trip to Europe with some friends. And it was a beautiful trip that required a lot of preparation on my part. And a couple days before we left, everything, all the planning seemed to fall into place. And I had such a sense of peace because I knew that it wouldn't be me doing all this preparation, but listening to God to know that He would be directing every step of the way. I wanted to especially thank this church and the practitioner who gave me the quote for travel from the Psalms, Psalms 121, I believe it's verse 7 or 8. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. This one passage I held to the entire trip because it just gave me such peace. From the moment we collected our luggage, there seemed to be something funny about the luggage collection because our luggage wasn't there. And we had waited for a good half hour, and it seemed to be the right place, and other people were getting their luggage from the same flight. And I clung to this verse, and I wasn't scared. And then out of the blue, this man from the airline walked up to us and said, "Your luggage is at such and such a place. Go up the stairs, go down the hall, and you'll find it." And it was a good 5-minute walk, and our luggage was mysteriously in this other place. There wasn't a lot of luggage from our flight there, but ours was there. And I thought, well, I can't give any kind of human explanation as to how this man knew our luggage was there. But I knew that God knew exactly where all our luggage was. And this Bible verse, that the Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore, was guiding all of us each step of the way. That was just the beginning of our trip, which involved six different destinations, 6 different places to stay, and a lot of coming and going in cars, taxis, whatever. I love having the Bible as not just a theoretical help, but a true help, a practical help. And I think the teachings in this wonderful independent Christian Science church for truly teaching us different ways that the Bible can truly be our guide and our help and proof that God is ever with us every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig.
I thank Amanda for those really, really helpful readings. And the music was so touching. I want to give gratitude to today because we have so much good material of truth from early workers. And Shahe Dot reminded me to look at The Power of the Right Idea again. And I did, by Martha Wilcox, a student of Mrs. Eddy's. I was my life was going along, but I did feel something needed to change. I have a young son, but felt that there were going to be demands that I wasn't sure how I was going to meet in the future. So we started talking about it, and it was so good about how God is always with us, but also that if something is true, as Mrs. Eddy has said, by affirming that to be true, which by all human reasoning or sight seems not to be true at all, you can bring it to pass. But statements like that lifted me to the humdrum, I guess, or just moving along into let's do better. It was invigorating, and it was inspiring, and it led me on to realize that there is so much that God has for each of us, and each of us to do. And soon after, I found that there was some training that would help me make the next step if I wanted to do better things or more. And then with prayer and knowing that God always hears us, and that the right idea is complete right now, I was directed to money for that same training. And then after giving that money, I was then directed that there's also a stipend for as long as I'm taking training, that they'll give me a check, which I wasn't expecting. And I was just thinking, I was just going along, but God had a much better idea that was so much more joyous and happy and satisfying. All right, it removed any sort of issues of possible doubt about the future, and said, and I'm sure as example to other people that may just be doing enough, but God has even more for them to do and to bless. I thank God for what we hear and discover in this science, in this brotherhood here.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Words alone are not enough for me to express my deep gratitude for Christian Science. Only my love for it and the desire to daily live it to the best of my ability and to honor God is all that makes me feel, in a small way, that I'm paying my debt for this priceless understanding of God. Once again, recently, I had the opportunity to prove some of what science has given me during the recent sudden passing of a dear relative. I shared this with the practitioner here and another. The practitioner shared so much truth about the lie of death, which helped fortify what I have learned about God's love in times like this. I also know that the other person was knowing the truth, and I'm deeply grateful for all the good thoughts. There were a few moments when those pangs of anxiety tempted, and I'm so glad for the practice of turning quickly to God, because each time I did that, the awful feelings disappeared, and the love of God replaced them all. I'm so grateful for the instruction that at times it's not so many words that we need, but to know and to hold to, be still, and know that I am God. And I am grateful for the result of this. I am thankful to have been able to stand with the truth and bless others. Many blessings came out of this experience, some which I know will be revealed in times to come. Thank you, Amanda, for the beautiful readings, powerful readings, and the hymns. And thanks for every testimony. I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Tonight I have an email to read from California. I am so grateful I can't keep it to myself. I am so grateful for Christian Science, and I'm so grateful that the Plainfield Christian Science Church became independent. The information provided from Plainfield is so unique and beneficial. I learned so much from the articles from Herbert W. Eustace, Bicknell Young, Gilbert Carpenter, and Mrs. Martha Wilcox. My life is changing. I love my life, and I would like to share with you what I mean. I was born in El Salvador in 1970. I was raised with no religion. My father was a wonderful father and a military man who kept religion away from us. But God always made a way into our lives. However, in 1980, my father was killed during the Civil War in my country. I was present during this event, and I was 10 years old. My mother had to leave the country, and she came to the United States of America to be able to provide for us. We were 3 girls, and I am the youngest. A neighbor had shared Psalm 91 with us. She said that we should read it if we ever felt scared. I learned Psalm 91 and would fall asleep repeating it many nights. Because of the death of my father, I found myself lost and confused. One day, I told myself that I was going to pretend that my father had not died and try to live my life pretending. At that very moment, I heard a voice that told me that I should not believe lies and that I should learn the truth. The voice told me that he was my real father and I could trust him. And I did. I lived my life following the counsel of the voice, which I called God. Since my mother had left, we had to live in different places with different people, and I always followed that voice of God and never struggled with anything. People would always love me and care for me, no matter where I went. Every time I felt scared because of the war going on, I was always able to run to God. It was marvelous. It was just like Psalm 91 says. I was dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. My childhood was wonderful because of this relationship I had with God. I remember I read the whole Bible when I was 10 years old and followed the Proverbs to the mark. God showed me and taught me so many wonderful things. I never followed any particular religion. This was done just by being able to listen to the voice of God and willing to follow Him. I guess that since I was a kid, I didn't have anything worldly that could stand in my way. In my late teens, I gave room to mortal mind and lost my connection with God. I had tried to gain it back, but I had not been successful. I studied different religions on my own, but it didn't help. Until now that I found Mrs. Eddy's Christian Science. I am starting to hear the voice of God again. I am starting to go into His presence like I used to, the secret place of the Most High. It's taking me to work for it, but I'm glad to do the work. There is still a lot for me to learn, but I know that I'm going the right way now. Each day it gets better. I am so grateful for Christian Science and for the Plainfield Christian Science Church. I appreciate all the work that is done in Plainfield. And we are very grateful for her. She's been a wonderful translator for us. Right away she joined in to help. Thank God. Thank God she found us. And someone had directed her our way, another member, so. And then this email is from England. Thank you so much for the round table with the suggestions about not mourning. The article, There Is No Death, which was read, being a letter from one of Mr. Eustace's students to him, was just amazing and so encouraging and comforting. I have listened to the recording again and also share with others if they are having a hard time with this sort of experience. About a year ago, I bought a scratching post for our cat from a local lady via the Gumtree website, and it turned out that she was selling it because her cat had passed on. She was utterly distraught, although it had happened a month or two before. I was so pleased to be able to spend a little time with her and to gently say with conviction something along the lines that I was sure he was still progressing and being cared for. And I was so grateful that this seemed to comfort her a great deal, rather to my surprise, as we had only just met. I thank God so much that He had enabled me to help this lady, just a little. With very much gratitude to all of you at Plainfield. And then from our website bulletin board, Florida. Thank you for the new feature on the daily watching point. I scrolled down after reading the text for this week and saw something wonderfully new. I could now listen to the watching point being read. Thank you for all the inspirational resources on your beautiful website. I have gifted friends with 500 watching points by Gilbert Carpenter, available on your online bookstore. They have been so grateful for the wisdom shared by the Carpenter, as I am. A complex idea is beautifully translated into a concept more easily understood by the colorful metaphors expressed in the watching points. Thank you. And then Virginia. Many thanks for all the teaching and inspiration of the glorious Easter week with the subject of the lesson, Doctrine of Atonement. The instruction and enlightenment of the Saturday Bible study and the Sunday Roundtable are truly invaluable, with the lost cord of truth being the healing power of the Christ, and it is no longer lost, as Mrs. Eddy explains it in Science and Health. The Sunday service was sacred and culminated in the beautiful singing of the song In the Garden. It made quite an impression, even on my husband, who generally does not sing, but spontaneously joined in and sang at our home computer, along with the chorus. Thanks to all. And then Virginia, I just finished reading the citations which make up this week's Wednesday evening meeting service, entitled Trust in the Ever-Presence of Our Loving God. They are outstanding. Amanda has done such a thorough job, not only in the citation selected, but the order of the readings. The message is clear, comforting, and powerful. It is definitely a service I will refer back to often in my prayerful work, and I know that mind was present when these readings were put together, with love and gratitude for a beautiful job. Those were very beautiful readings tonight. Many of the readings from prose works were statements we had been given here to work with on the comfort and the power of God's presence. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm also grateful, I know you've heard me talk about our friend who goes by the pen name Parthens. He's from Colorado. He sends us all kinds of things and writes on our forum. But he sent me recently, it was a DVD entitled Robber of the Cruel Streets, The Prayerful Life of George Muller. Now, I would truly suggest if anyone can listen and watch this documentary, I guess it really was, they should, because it was such a beautiful example of what Amanda was reading about tonight. Trust in God, trusting the Father. This man, he grew up in Germany. When he was a young adult, he had become quite a womanizer and a playboy. He was kind of rebelling against his father's strict religious beliefs. But then one day, a friend invited him to a Bible study. His friend actually thought he would probably hate it, but he loved it. It was just a simple truth, the simple words of the Bible that touched his heart. And it changed his life. And after that, he became a very godly man. He ended up becoming a minister and preaching and married a godly woman. And this was during the 1800s. And at one time, he goes to England, and it was the time of Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist, and he saw all the poor orphan children on the streets. And he realized as a Christian that he needed to help, to do something to help. And one of his desires of his heart, and he'd been practicing this, was never to go out and ask for help, or even to go out and seek money. He relied wholly on God, his trust in God. That's what he relied on, and that was all he would rely on. And when he decided to have an orphanage, he decided he would also trust God with all the funds and everything that he needed for it. He knew it was an unselfish purpose, that it had to be God's plan. And sure enough, God provided him with everything that he needed. And he helped thousands of children in a town called Bristol, England. And it's just quite an inspiring story to see how he did this and how his trust in God, it wasn't just words, he lived it. So I was so grateful for that DVD. It was so inspirational. You can find it on Amazon Prime as well as ordering it as a DVD. But it shows the tremendous power of God when we trust in him with our whole heart. And it gives a new way to think about our finances. We know our supply is always from him. So I'm very grateful for this. Grateful for all that I'm learning being a member here in this church. And thank you all for a beautiful service. And thank you, Jim, for beautiful music.
Thank you.